They noticed him at the same time. A man sitting on the curb outside the glass doors of First Harbor Bank, not begging loudly, not waving a sign, just sitting still, like he was waiting for a verdict. Evan Mercer walked out with his phone at his ear and a coffee he did not taste. He wore a suit that fit too well for how little sleep he had. The meeting on his calendar was labeled final, not because the pitch was finished, because if it failed, he might be finished. He saw the man and kept walking. The man lifted his head and spoke, calm and clear. "Sir, can you give me 5 minutes?" Evan did not stop. He tossed a glance over his shoulder and said the sentence he had learned to say without feeling it. "Sorry, I don't have cash." The man shook his head. "I didn't ask for money. I asked for 5 minutes." Evan stopped, annoyed by the correction. He turned, ready to end it. The man's eyes were tired but focused, as if he had rehearsed this moment. 5 minutes. That's all I need. Then you can go back to your life." Evan looked around. People were passing with earbuds in, pretending they didn't see. A security guard near the door watched like this was a slow movie. Evan's voice sharpened. "I'm late. Ask someone else." The man did not raise his voice. He only pointed at Evan's phone. "Because you have a phone, and because you look like you still care, even if you pretend you don't." Evan felt heat crawl up his neck. He hated being read. He hated being slowed down. He hated the way guilt could reach through a suit. He took one step closer and lowered his voice. "Listen, I can't help you." The man nodded once. "Then help her." Evan blinked. "Who?" The man swallowed hard. "My daughter." Evan's irritation flickered into discomfort. He had heard every story in the city. Sick mother, lost job, rent due. But this did not sound like a pitch. Evan said, "Your daughter needs money." The man said, "She needs someone to hear her, and she won't answer me anymore." Evan's phone buzzed with another reminder. Final meeting. He should have walked away. But something about the man's tone felt different. Not frantic, not manipulative. More like a man who had already lost and was trying one last thing with whatever dignity he had left. Evan looked at his watch. He had 10 minutes. He could spare 5. Or he could pretend he could not. He said, 5 minutes, that's it." The man exhaled, like someone had finally opened a door. "My name is Calvin," he said. "Thank you." Evan did not know why, but that name landed heavy. Calvin. Like it meant something he could not place. Calvin stood slowly, joints stiff, and led Evan toward a bench just out of the wind. Evan stayed half a step behind, cautious, scanning for a trap. Calvin sat and kept his hands visible. He spoke like a man trying not to break. 5 minutes, Evan repeated. Calvin nodded. 5 minutes to do the right thing, before it becomes too late for anyone to fix it. Evan tried to keep his face blank. He had been trained for this city. The look of need. The story that hooked you. The moment you reached for your wallet, and the hook sank deeper. He learned that lesson at 22 when he handed a stranger $20 outside a subway station. The stranger thanked him, smiled, then followed him for 3 blocks asking for more. By the 4th block, the stranger was shouting insults. Evan never forgot the feeling. Not just fear, the humiliation of being generous and then punished for it. So now, Evan kept his kindness behind a locked door. He told himself it was maturity. He told himself it was survival. Calvin watched him like he could see the lock. "I don't want your money," Calvin said again. "I don't want your pity. I want your voice." Evan frowned. "My voice?" Calvin nodded. "Because she won't hear mine, and she won't trust anyone from my world." Evan almost asked what that meant. Almost. His phone buzzed again. He silenced it. and looked at Calvin. "Start talking." Calvin's throat moved like he was swallowing glass. "My daughter works in this building," he said. "Upstairs." Evan glanced at the bank doors. Calvin continued. "She started last month. First real job, first real suit." She was proud. Evan asked, "So call her." Calvin's eyes dropped. "I did. Every day. She blocked me." Evan felt a familiar edge rise. Then why would she answer a stranger? Calvin's answer came out quiet. "Because she thinks I ruin everything I touch, and maybe she's right. But she doesn't know what's coming for her." Calvin leaned forward, voice low. "Her name is Lila. She works in the loan office. They put her on a team with a man named Ross Madsen." Evan didn't recognize the name, but he recognized the pattern. A new hire, a powerful supervisor, a workplace you don't understand until it hurts you. Evan asked, "What is coming?" Calvin's hands tightened on his knees. "A charge, an arrest, something that will follow her forever." Evan stared. "Why would they arrest a new employee?" Calvin said, "Because someone needs a fall guy, and a new employee is easy to shape." Evan almost laughed. It sounded dramatic. It sounded like paranoia in the cold. Then Calvin said one sentence that pulled Evan's attention into focus. "They did it to me." Evan's stomach tightened. "You worked here." Calvin nodded. "Compliance, risk review, 10 years. He looked past Evan toward the bank doors. "Then one morning, security walked me out like I was trash." Evan studied Calvin's face. The lines were real. The shame was real. But shame could be performed. Evan asked, "Why are you out here then?" Calvin's voice stayed even, like he had repeated this truth until it stopped sounding like fiction. "Because I lost everything after they blamed me. My savings, my house, my marriage." He paused. "And my daughter." Evan's phone buzzed again. Final meeting. He should have stood up. But now 5 minutes did not feel like 5 minutes. It felt like a doorway. Evan asked, "If you're telling the truth, why not go to the police?" Calvin's jaw tightened. "I tried. They said it was internal. They said it was complicated. They said they needed evidence." He looked at Evan. "I have evidence now, but I need someone on the inside to listen." Evan frowned. "Why me?" Calvin nodded at Evan's ID badge lanyard. It was tucked into Evan's coat, but visible if you were looking. First Harbor had invited Evan as an external consultant for the meeting upstairs. Calvin said, "Because they will let you into rooms they will never let me into." Evan felt a chill. "How do you know I'm going upstairs?" Calvin's eyes dropped to Evan's phone. Your screen lit up. Meeting reminder. Floor 18. "I can read." Evan exhaled through his nose. This was not a scam. This was a man watching the only door he could still reach. Calvin said, "I don't need you to be a hero." He swallowed. "I need you to deliver a warning. And I need you to keep your eyes open." Evan looked at the bank doors again. The security guard was still watching. Evan felt his own pride push back. He did not like being recruited by desperation. But he also did not like the possibility that a young woman could be destroyed while everyone acted like it was normal. Evan said, "Where is she right now?" Calvin's voice broke just slightly. "Upstairs, in the office, thinking she finally made it." Evan stood. "Show me her photo." Calvin pulled out a folded wallet that looked too clean for the street. Inside was a small picture. A young woman in a cheap blazer, smiling like she believed the future was safe. Evan's chest tightened. "Okay," he said. "You have 5 more minutes. Walk with me to the door. Then you wait." Inside the bank, the air smelled like polished floors and controlled voices. Evan checked in at the front desk and flashed his visitor pass. No one looked at him twice. He was dressed like he belonged. Calvin stayed outside, where he could be ignored. Evan rode the elevator up, watching the numbers climb. His phone buzzed again. He ignored it. On the 18th floor, the loan office was glass and beige and quiet. People typed without looking up. A printer hummed, like it was the loudest thing allowed. Evan spotted her near the back, standing at a copier with a stack of forms. Lila. The smile from the photo was gone. Her shoulders were tense, like she was bracing for something she couldn't name. Evan approached gently. "Excuse me," he said. "Lila." She turned fast, startled. "Yes?" Evan lowered his voice. "My name is Evan Mercer. I'm here for the meeting with Executive Review." He kept it simple. "I need to tell you something. Privately." Lila's eyes narrowed. "About what?" Evan chose the safest truth. "About your father." Her face changed instantly. It hardened, like a door slamming. "I don't have a father," she said. Evan felt the words hit him like cold water. He did not argue. He only held up the photo from Calvin's wallet, turned slightly so she could see. Lila's breath caught. Her eyes flicked to the hallway. Then she grabbed Evan's wrist and pulled him toward a copy room. The door shut behind them. Lila hissed. "Where did you get that?" Evan said. "He asked for 5 minutes. Not money. He asked me to talk to you." Her expression twisted with anger and something else under it. "Of course he did. He always finds a way to reach me." Evan said, "He thinks you're in danger." Lila let out a bitter laugh. "My father thinks the world is out to get him." Evan stayed calm. "He says the bank framed him. He says they will frame you." Lila's eyes flashed. "He's lying. He's always lying." Her voice dropped. "He stole. He embarrassed us. He ruined my mom." Evan heard the pain behind the anger. "He did not push. He asked one question. Then why did you block him?" Lila's jaw trembled. "Because every time he speaks, something breaks." The copy room door opened. A man stepped in without knocking, tall and smooth, wearing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ross Madsen." Well?" Ross said. "Our new hire already has a private meeting with a visitor." Lila stiffened. "Ross." "It's nothing." Ross's smile widened. "Everything is something in this building." He looked at Evan. "And you are." Evan held his visitor badge up. "Evan Mercer, external consultant, executive review meeting." Ross's eyes flicked to the badge, then back to Lila. "Interesting." His tone stayed pleasant. "Lila, the compliance folder. Bring it to my office in 5 minutes." Lila swallowed. "Yes, Ross." Ross turned to leave, then paused. "And Lila?" He smiled again. "Keep your personal life out of my department. It makes people sloppy." When the door shut, Lila looked like she had been slapped. Evan said, "That's the man?" Lila whispered, "He's not just my boss." She stared at the floor. "He's the reason I can't breathe in this place." Evan's meeting reminder lit up again. He had minutes. Evan said, "Tell me what's happening." Lila hesitated. Then she said, "They are building a case, and I think I'm the case." Lila spoke fast, like she was afraid the walls were listening. "Ross keeps giving me special assignments. After hours, no email, just verbal." She rubbed her wrist where Evan had held the photo. "He says it's because I'm smart, because he trusts me." Evan asked, "What kind of assignments?" Lila swallowed. "Downloading customer files, printing statements, moving documents to a shared drive I can't see afterward." Her voice dropped. "Last week he asked for my login. He said it was to run a report while I was out sick." Evan's eyes narrowed. "You gave it to him?" Lila flinched. "I didn't want to. He said if I didn't, it would look like I was hiding something." She shook her head. "And I'm on probation. New hire. 1 complaint, and I'm done." Evan felt anger rise, clean and sharp. He had seen this before. Not in banks. In boardrooms, in deals. Power didn't need to shout. It only needed to make you feel replaceable. Evan said, "Have you seen anything missing?" Leela nodded. 2 days ago, a folder disappeared from my desk. Then Ross asked me if I remembered moving it. Her eyes filled. I didn't move it, but he said security would confirm. She laughed once, without humor. Security confirms whatever Ross wants. Evan considered his options. His meeting upstairs could make or break his job, but he could hear Calvin's voice in his head. 5 minutes to do the right thing. Evan said, "Your father thinks they will blame you for something big." Lila's face tightened. "They already are." She lowered her voice. "Ross told me an audit is coming. He said, if you stay calm, you'll be fine." She stared at Evan. He said it like a threat. Evan asked, "Do you have anything in writing?" Lila shook her head. "He doesn't put it in writing." She hesitated. "Except one thing." She opened her email on the office computer and typed quickly. A short thread popped up. Ross had sent a message at 11:48 p.m. It was one line. "Need the files. Use your credentials. Don't delay." Evan stared at the screen. It was not proof of a crime by itself, but it was proof of a pattern, and it was proof he was pulling her into risk. Evan said, "Forward that to yourself, right now." Leela blinked. "Why?" Evan said, "Because if your inbox gets wiped, your memory doesn't matter." He kept his tone steady. "Forward it to a personal email, then delete nothing." Leela's fingers shook as she forwarded it. Evan glanced at the clock. He had 2 minutes before he had to walk into a room full of executives who expected him to speak like nothing else existed. He said, "Listen carefully. If Ross asks for your login again, you say no. If he asks you to move files, you ask for it in writing. If he threatens you, you document it." Lila looked at him like he was the first person in the building who wasn't trying to own her. She asked, "Why are you helping me?" Evan hesitated. Evan said, "Because this feels wrong, and because someone asked me for 5 minutes and it didn't sound like a scam." Lila swallowed hard. "He's outside, isn't he?" Evan nodded. Lila's eyes flashed with anger again. "Tell him to leave." Evan said, "After my meeting." "And Lila, if I'm right, you will need someone who can speak in rooms you can't enter." Lila whispered, "Like you." Evan said, "Yes." He stepped toward the door. "Stay visible, stay normal, and do not go into Ross's office alone." Lila nodded, terrified. Evan walked out, back into glass and beige and quiet. He headed toward the executive conference room. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. Because now the meeting wasn't just about him. It was about whether a young woman got erased to protect a man with power. The executive conference room looked like a place where decisions were made without anyone raising their voice. A long table, cold water, smiles that stayed shallow. Evan took his seat and opened his laptop. Across from him sat Ross Madsen, calm as stone. Ross nodded to Evan like they were allies. A senior director started the meeting. "We have concerns about a portfolio leak and unauthorized access. Compliance wants clarity before the audit." Ross spoke smoothly. "My team has been cooperative. We discovered anomalies tied to a single user profile." Evan felt his stomach tighten. He knew who the single user profile would be. Ross continued, "A new employee, limited experience, poor judgment." He didn't say Lila's name yet. He let the room imagine the type. Evan watched the executives lean in. They loved a simple answer, a single name you could remove like a stain. Evan said, "Before we label anything, we need the full access logs." He kept his voice professional. Timestamps, IP locations, device fingerprints, and privilege escalations. Ross smiled. "Of course, we have logs." Evan said, "Good. Then we can confirm whether the activity was performed by the user or by a proxy." He glanced at Ross. "Because credentials are often borrowed." Ross's smile held, but his eyes tightened for half a second. A director asked, "Are you saying someone used her login?" Evan said, "I'm saying it's common. And the audit will ask that question first." Ross leaned back. "Our internal review indicates the user performed the actions. He spoke like the case was closed. Evan asked, "Did your internal review include security footage?" He let the question hang. "Badge access. After hours entry." Ross's tone stayed polite. "We can request it." Evan nodded. "Request it now." He turned to the director. If the activity happened late at night and the user wasn't on site, the narrative changes. Ross's jaw flexed. He said, "We don't want to waste time." Evan held his gaze. "We don't want to waste a person." The room went quiet for a beat. Then a compliance officer spoke. "Who is the employee?" Ross finally said it. "Lila Hart." Evan felt the name land like a weight. He kept his face neutral. The director asked, "Is she in the building?" Ross said, "Yes. She will be available for questioning." Evan said, "No." He did not shout. He simply stated it. "Not alone. Not without counsel." He looked at the compliance officer. "If you question a new hire without procedure, you contaminate the investigation." Ross smiled again. "You're very protective of someone you met today." Evan answered, "I'm protective of the process." Then he added the sentence that mattered. "And the recording." Ross blinked. "What recording?" Evan said, "Any environment with security cameras has a record of truth. Let's not build a story before we check it." A phone vibrated on the table. Not Evan's, Ross's. Ross glanced down. For a moment, his calm slipped. Meanwhile, downstairs, Calvin stood in the cold, watching the elevator doors like they could open for him. A security guard approached him. 2 steps, hand near the radio. Calvin lifted his hands slightly. He did not run. He said, "I'm waiting for my daughter." His voice trembled. "Please don't make this worse." The guard said, "You can't loiter here." Calvin nodded. "I understand." He pointed toward the lobby glass. "Just tell her I'm here." Lila Hart. The guard's face changed. Recognition, not of Calvin, of the name. The guard spoke into his radio. Upstairs, Ross's phone buzzed again. He tightened his grip. Evan watched him. Evan understood something then. This wasn't a mistake. This was a plan that had already started moving. Evan asked for a break. He framed it as logistics. "Before we accuse anyone, I need direct access to the audit trail." The director agreed. Ross did not argue. But his smile looked thinner now. In the hallway, Evan approached the compliance officer, a woman named Priya. He spoke quietly. "Do you have an investigator assigned?" Priya said, "Not yet. It's still internal." Evan said, "Then it's vulnerable." He lowered his voice further. "That new hire is being set up." Priya studied him. "You sound certain." Evan said, "I'm certain enough to slow this down." He pulled up the forwarded email on his phone, the one Lila had just sent herself. He showed Priya the subject line and Ross's instruction. Priya's eyes narrowed. "This is unprofessional." Evan said, "It's a breadcrumb, not a conviction." "But Ross is pushing a narrative before we see data." Priya nodded once. "What do you want?" Evan said, "Bring IT into a room, pull device logs, and speak to Lila with a witness present. Recorded. No intimidation." Priya breathed out. "Okay." They walked toward the loan office together. Lila was at her desk, trying to look normal. Her hands shook slightly as she typed nonsense into a spreadsheet. Ross watched her from his office doorway like a fisherman watching a line. When Priya approached, Ross stepped forward fast. "Priya, perfect. We need Lila now." Priya said, "We will speak with her in the interview room." With notes, her voice was calm and final. Ross smiled. "Of course." Then he turned to Lila. "Don't worry, just tell the truth." Lila's eyes flashed toward Evan. She looked like she was walking into a storm she could not see. In the interview room, Priya placed a recorder on the table and said, "This is standard." Ross's smile twitched. Priya asked, "Have you shared your login?" Lila hesitated. Evan said, "Tell the timeline." Lila swallowed. "Ross asked for my credentials once. He said it was for a report. I gave them to him." Ross leaned forward. That is not what you told me, Lila. Priya looked at Ross. Ross, you are not the interviewer. Ross leaned back, still smiling. My apologies. Lila continued. He also asked me to download files after hours. He said it was urgent. Priya asked, do you have those instructions in writing? Leela shook her head. Mostly verbal, except one email. Priya asked Lila to forward it to compliance. Lila did. Ross's phone buzzed again. His eyes were colder now. Evan's phone vibrated too. A message from the lobby security desk. Homeless male asking for Lila Hart. Do you know him? Evan felt the air leave his lungs. Calvin. They were moving him. Evan stood. Priya paused the interview. He looked at Lila. Your father is downstairs. Security is with him. Lila's face went pale, then angry. Why is he here? Ross stood too. Quick. This is inappropriate. Remove him. His voice sharpened for the first time. Immediately, Priya stared at Ross. Why do you care if a father shows up? Ross froze. The smile returned like a mask. I care about workplace disruption. Evan said, we are not removing anyone until we see the logs. Priya nodded. Agreed. Lila whispered, he's going to ruin everything. Evan said softly, he might be the reason you don't get ruined. Priya stood. We are going to retrieve the access logs now. She looked at Ross. With it in writing. Ross smiled. Of course. But as Ross walked out, Evan saw his hand tighten into a fist behind his back. If Ross could not win with paperwork, he would win with panic. It pulled the logs in a small server room that smelled like dust and chilled air. A technician displayed a timeline on a monitor. Priya pointed. These access events happened at 11:41 p.m. and 12:03 a.m. Ross said, yes. Lila stayed late to help. Lila's head snapped up. I did not. Ross didn't look at her. He looked at the technician. Badge logs will show she entered. Evan asked, what device executed the actions? The technician clicked deeper. Device ID is listed. He hesitated. Assigned laptop. Ramadson. The room went still. Ross laughed softly, like it was absurd. That's not possible. Someone must have spoofed it. Evan said, do we have IP and location? The technician nodded. Internal Wi-Fi. Conference room access point. And the login used was Lila's credentials. Priya stared at Ross. Your laptop, her credentials. After hours. Ross's smile vanished. His face showed anger without polish. This is a technical misunderstanding, Ross said. Evan leaned forward. A misunderstanding does not send files to an external address. Where did the files go? The technician clicked again. An encrypted upload path appeared. External. Priya asked, who has admin approval for external transfers? The technician answered quietly. Ross does. Ross stepped closer to the monitor. You can't prove I did it. Anyone could have used my laptop, Evan said. Then, let's check the camera. Is there footage of the conference room? The technician nodded. Building security keeps it. Ross's eyes flicked to the door. Then he pulled his phone out and started typing. Priya said, Ross, what are you doing? Ross looked up, calm returning like a switch. Calling legal. Evan said, you're calling someone to delete something. Ross's eyes hardened. You have no authority here. Priya said, I have authority. This is now a formal investigation. Ross looked at Lila. His voice turned low. If you admit you shared your login, we can make this smaller for you. Lila stared at him, stunned. Evan stepped between them. Do not speak to her like that. Downstairs, security escorted Calvin toward the sidewalk. Calvin kept looking back, searching for a face he had memorized. Lila ran to the elevator before anyone could stop her. Evan followed. Priya followed. In the lobby, Calvin was outside, hands visible, walking like his legs were made of stone. The guard said, you need to move along. Lila pushed through the glass doors. Dad, Calvin turned. For a second, he looked like he might collapse. Then his face tightened into control. "Leela," he said softly. Leela's voice shook with anger. "Why are you here? You promised you would leave me alone." Calvin held up both hands. "I tried to. Then I heard Ross was moving money again. I knew what he'd do. He'd blame the newest person. He'd blame you." Lila flinched. "Stop saying his name like you know him." Calvin said, "I know him. He was my supervisor. I filed a report on him years ago. It vanished, and then they made me vanish." Lila's eyes widened. Calvin reached into his coat and pulled out a sealed plastic sleeve. Inside was a printed report with a header: Risk Review. His name, dates, account numbers. Ross Madsen. Unauthorized transfers. Calvin said, "I kept copies. I couldn't prove it then. I can prove it now, if you let me." Priya stepped forward. "I'm compliance. I need that document." Calvin handed it over carefully. Lila looked at Calvin like he might be real. "A warning," Calvin said. "I didn't come for money. I came for you." And for the first time in years, Lila did not turn away. The next hours moved like a machine waking up. Priya sealed the logs. IT backed up the data twice. Security pulled footage from the conference room. On the video, a man entered after midnight. Ross. He sat alone at the table, opened his laptop, and typed. When the screen showed him plugging in a small drive, the room went silent. Ross watched the playback with his face blank. Then he stood and said, "This is a witch hunt. I built this department." Priya answered, "Then you destroyed it too." Ross was escorted out. Not in handcuffs, not yet, but in the corporate way. That meant the story was now bigger than him. Leela sat in an empty office with Evan nearby, staring at her hands. "I almost gave him everything," she whispered. Evan said, "You didn't. You hesitated. That saved you." Leela shook her head. "I gave him my credentials. I was so desperate to be good at this." Evan said, "You were set up. That is different from being guilty." Priya returned. "Leela, you are not under investigation. You are a witness, and we will protect you from retaliation." Leela exhaled a shaky breath. Then she asked, "What happens now?" Priya said, "Now it goes external." Outside, Calvin sat on the bench, wrapped in a thin coat. He looked smaller now, like he had used his last energy to push the truth through a door. Leela approached slowly. She stood in front of him, arms crossed. Calvin did not speak first. He waited. Leela said, "You let Mom think you stole. You let me think it too." Calvin swallowed. "I tried to tell her. They threatened me. I thought silence would protect you. I was wrong." Leela laughed bitterly. "It didn't protect anything. Why didn't you fight harder?" Calvin's eyes filled. "I did. I filed reports. I begged people to listen. And when no one listened, I lost my footing. I started sleeping in my car. Then the car got towed. Then I slept wherever I could. I kept one thing clean." He tapped his wallet. "Your picture." Leela stared at the ground. "Mom said you chose pride over us." Calvin shook his head. "No. I chose you over pride. I chose silence because I thought silence was safer." Leela finally looked at him. "Do you know what it was like? To watch you disappear and not know if it was because you didn't love me or because you were ashamed?" Calvin's voice broke. "I loved you every day I breathed." Leela wiped her face fast, angry at the tears. Leela asked, "Why did you trust Ross?" Calvin said, "I didn't. I was gathering evidence, and the day I had enough, the evidence vanished. Then I vanished." Leela stared at him. The story in her head cracked. Calvin said, "I asked a stranger for 5 minutes because I knew you wouldn't give me one. I hated that it was true." Leela sat on the bench, one space away. Not close, but not far. She whispered, "I don't know how to fix this." Calvin answered, "1 minute at a time. And if you can't start with love, Start with truth. Lila nodded, exhausted. Then she said, "Tell me everything." Calvin took a breath and began. The investigation moved faster once the bank feared headlines. External auditors arrived. Lawyers asked questions that did not care about Ross's charm. The transfers were traced. The drive on Ross's laptop matched the encrypted upload. The conference room footage matched the timestamps. By Friday, police arrived. Ross did not smile when they did. He was led out through a side exit, cameras waiting at the street. He looked straight ahead, jaw clenched, as if he could outstare consequences. Lila watched from a window and felt her legs go weak. Evan stood beside her. Evan said, "This is what power looks like when it runs out." Lila whispered, "He almost made me carry it." Evan nodded. "And you almost let him, because you were trying to be good. That's why they pick newcomers. Newcomers still believe effort equals safety." Lila looked down at the street. "What happens to my father now?" Evan said, "If the bank framed him, his case gets reopened. And if it doesn't, I will make noise until it does." Lila looked at Evan. "You would do that?" Evan answered honestly. "I used to believe staying out of it meant staying safe. Now I know staying out of it just means someone else pays the price." That evening, Evan drove Calvin and Lila to a small diner. Not a celebration, just food, because none of them had eaten like humans in days. Calvin sat with his hands around a warm mug, as if he was borrowing heat. Lila watched him the way you watch someone you thought was gone. She asked, "Where did you sleep?" Calvin told the truth. Shelters, cars, parking garages, a church basement. He did not dramatize it. He did not ask for sympathy. Lila pushed her plate toward him. "Eat," Calvin said. "I don't want to take your food." Lila said, "You're not taking, you're coming back." Calvin stared, stunned. "Back where?" Lila swallowed. "My apartment is small, but you can have the couch until we figure it out." Calvin looked down, fighting tears. "I don't want to ruin your life again." Lila said, "You didn't ruin it. People did, and I let them convince me you deserved it." "I'm sorry." Calvin nodded. "Thank you for saying it." On Monday, Priya called. "Calvin's file is being reviewed. Your document helped. He may be cleared." Calvin closed his eyes and breathed out like he had been holding his breath for years. Lila took his hand. Not tightly, just enough to say, "I'm here." Evan went back to his job and walked into his own meeting. The deal still mattered, but it no longer felt like the only thing that mattered. Weeks later, Calvin received a letter. The bank settled, not loudly, but enough to admit what they had done. Calvin was not rich. He was not instantly restored, but he was no longer invisible. Lila framed the photo from his wallet and put it on her shelf, not as a reminder of pain, as a reminder that she almost lost the truth because she wanted a clean story. Evan told no one about his part. He did not post it. He did not perform it. He simply did the next right thing when it showed up. Sometimes the person asking for money is asking for survival. But sometimes the person asking for time is asking for a chance to keep someone else from being erased. And the next time Evan heard a quiet voice say, "Can you spare a minute?" he did not walk away, because he knew what 5 minutes could save. 2 days later, Evan would be tested again, inside a hospital corridor, where a janitor was being blamed for something he did not do. And Evan would recognize the pattern immediately, because once you hear the truth behind the noise, you start seeing the trap everywhere.